And so here, let me just look now, let's look at this word emptiness. I think we get very confused when we hear this word emptiness. We have to realize emptiness. This is one of the commonest phrases you're going to see in the Buddhist literature. We need to realize emptiness. And so, of course, it's this curious word, and it's not complicated. It's not difficult to imagine how we think it is meaning nothingness, but it's not that. So we have to get our head around the use of this word. It's kind of important. So I use ordinary examples. I do this all the time, and you're familiar with it perhaps, but it's really important just to get our head around the idea of how there can exist. I'm using my words, how there can exist a phenomenon called the absence of something. You see, like we said before, Buddhism, when you first study Buddhist philosophy, you learn this kind of the Buddhist worldview, and you learn these first few words, the first synonyms that refer to that which exists. And the key point about that which exists, as I said, the definition of an existent, this is a massively important point to get. I said one of those 5 synonyms is an existent. So that which exists is defined as it's being something that is cognized by mind. So mind cognizes things. So the way mind cognizes, it seems like the way the mind cognizes, kind of like, I put it this way, the mind cognizes nouns, things, phenomena, things. So there's all kinds of things that exist, using this word very roughly. There's physical things that we can see easily and look at, computers and roses and glasses and lights and things like this. It's pretty simple. But then we have more subtle phenomena called mind. Mind you can't taste or touch or smell, but there's still things that can be cognized. So then you've got, and these are all the simple impermanent phenomena. The things that are the objects of our senses, for example, are all things that exist. So then there are also phenomena that are a bit more abstract. And this is what an absence of something is. And this is where this concept of emptiness fits in. So I'll use ordinary examples. You know perfectly well that if you pick up your thermos, you pick up your cup, and you're expecting your tea to be there. There's an expectation. You pick up your cup, about to drink it, and you put it to your mouth, and you suddenly discover there's no tea there. Isn't it? That's a common, and we'll say, oh, my cup's empty. If you're looking for a friend and you go to a hotel, there's some kind of conference on, and you're looking for your right room, and you say it's room 7, and you open the door and you go, oh, no, it's all empty. The room's empty. If you're looking in your bank account and you think your $5,000 is there, you know you've saved it, and you look up and you see 0. Oh my God, my bank account is empty. We get these ideas. It's not a complicated concept. So putting it in this way, how does the mind cognize that? Well, the mind cognizes nouns. The mind cognizes things. So then you could put it this way. We could say my mind is cognizing that there is no tea in my cup. Well, turn that into a noun. And what you're saying is your mind just cognized the phenomenon called the absence of tea. It seems abstract and kind of wordy, but that's the way mind cognizes. The mind just cognized the phenomenon called the absence of tea. So put it this way, if there is tea in your cup, then the mind cognizes the phenomenon called tea. Now, for the person who expects tea to be there and discovers, oh my God, my cup is empty. Empty of what? Tea. So then the mind cognizes the phenomenon called the absence of tea. That we can get that. Well, that's what the mind is doing when you realize the emptiness of inherent existence. Your mind is cognizing the absence of inherent existence. So realizing emptiness is referring to that. It's not realizing there's no I, there's nothingness, I might as well die. It's just cognized a very vivid phenomenon. When the first time you ever realized emptiness, in the subtlety of your single-pointed concentration, after countless lifetimes of hard work, or however many lifetimes you've worked at it, and at some point exactly at 3.5 seconds past 4 in the afternoon in your meditation, you will see for the first time directly, nakedly, non-conceptually, at a subtle level of your mind, you will cognize the phenomenon called the absence of inherent me. That's emptiness. It just means the absence of something, the absence of something. Now, this is an interesting point. The only person who will notice that the cup has no tea in it, think about this, it's so simple. The only person who will notice that the cup has no tea in it, the only person who will cognize the absence of tea is the person who expects tea. The only person who will walk into a hotel room and notice that the room is empty of people is the person who expects people to be there. The only person who will look in their bank account and notice the absence of their precious $5,000, the phenomenon called the absence of $5,000, that is a phenomenon. The absence of $5,000 is an existent, is a phenomenon, is an object of knowledge, just like the $5,000 would be if it were there. So the mind cognizes something, always cognizes something. So these somethings are either simple impermanent phenomena like the objects of the senses, or they're more subtle phenomena, seemingly quite abstract, called the absence of something. That's it. So that's what so emptiness here is not the emptiness of, the Buddha doesn't want us to realize the emptiness of tea in your cup. He doesn't want us to realize the absence of $5,000 in your bank. He wants us to cognize the very vivid, powerful, full-on, existent, real phenomenon called the absence of an inherent I. So the only person who's going to notice the absence of an inherent I is a person who believes there's an inherent I. Well, that's all of us. Join the universe. And that's why when you first seek nakedly, oh my God, there never has been, isn't, and never could be that I. That's when you realize emptiness. So as Rinpoche says, the greatest yogis have this amazing experience. It's utterly joyful and blissful, but equally it can be enormous fear. But he says fear, and even if you are meditating emptiness and you suddenly get a flash of the absence of that I, he says that fear is good. You don't resist it. Because the fact is you can never disappear. You can't be, there can't be nihilism. There can't be no I, utterly and completely. So it's nothing to be afraid of. So the absence, there's always, the mind cognizes something that exists. So in this case, the absence of tea exists in your cup. The absence of $5,000 exists in your bank. The absence of inherent existence exists in you. So this is the way to think of the words, you know. It just doesn't mean chuck out, as His Holiness says, you don't just chuck out all the bits, like as if you've got the IKEA box, you chuck out all the bits until you discover the I, and you discover there's no I. So you throw the thing in the bin. Oh, well, there's no I might as well kill myself. You won't find an independent, separate I. That's true. But there is an I that does exist, is a dependent arising I. So as Lama Tsongkhapa puts it so nicely, like these yogis, you know, the yogis talk, I mean, the realization of the yogis. He says, when you realize the emptiness of the intrinsic I, he says it's as if there's no I. Then dependent arising, there is an I. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. There's a really tasty way of putting it, you know. So and the other thing is, it's very simple. It's like, is another simple way of putting it. It's not nihilism, because you look at this one. You know, I use this example of the $5,000 in the bank. We say Mary thinks there's $5,000 in her bank. Which Mary have we got here? We've got Mary Camille. Okay, Mary believes there's $5,000 in her bank. She knows it with absolute certainty. She saved it. She sees it. She visualizes it. She tastes it. Her $5,000 is there. Now, let's just say she asks me to look in the bank account and see what's in there. And I will tell her the truth, and I'll say there's none. So now this is an analogy for nihilism. There are no dollars. In this case, it can be possible to be no dollars, like nihilism. There's nothing. So now I cognize an object called $0. You listen to this. I cognize that phenomenon. That's what appears to my mind, $0. That's the object I cognize. What's the object she cognizes? She does not cognize $0. She cognizes the absence of her precious $5,000. So the object Mary cognizes is the absence of $5,000. The object I cognize is the presence of $0. They are not the same phenomenon. So this is a rough analogy, because when you realize the absence of your inherent I, it's not, you don't realize there's no I. You realize the absence of the precious I you thought was there. That's a different phenomenon. That's not the same phenomenon as saying there is no I. The mind cognizes things. And in this case, these are more abstract phenomena that exist. It's not just playing with words, it's the way the mind cognizes, you know, and we can see this. The absence of anything. I mean, okay, these are all absences that are very unhappy absences. The yogi, when they discover the absence of their inherent I, they're in utter joy. It's the best absence in the universe. So a better absence would be this. Let's say Mary thinks she's got cancer. She believes in the presence of cancer. She believes in the presence of cancer. So she's devastated. You know, think about it. You know, naturally you come to terms with the fact you're going to die soon. You're devastated. Let's say she's got a husband and kids and dogs. She's got to learn to let go of all them. She's completely devastated. She's getting used to accepting that there is the presence of cancer. Then she goes back to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, sorry, I gave you the wrong x-rays. There is no cancer. Now, what does Mary just cognize? The absence of cancer. Now, I don't have cancer, but I'm not thinking every day, I'm cognizing the absence of cancer. I'm cognizing the absence of cancer. I don't think I've got cancer, so I don't bother thinking about it. So the only person who's going to cognize the absence of cancer is the person who's just told they haven't got it, but they thought it was there in the first place. The only person who cognizes the absence of tea in a cup is the person who expects tea. The only person who cognizes the absence of, you know, $5,000 is the person who expects $5,000. So the only person who's going to cognize the absence of an inherent I is a person who thinks there's an inherent I and happens to be everybody in the universe. So once you've realized that absence for the first time, nakedly, non-conceptually, at the subtle level of your mind, direct perception, they call it, not just conceptual. We have to understand it first conceptually. That's a good start, but the realization of it, and that's what they say is that cuts the root of this maripa, that cuts the root of this ignorance. And that's what we've never done until now. We've had shine, we've had single point of concentration, the Buddha says, countless lifetimes. We've kind of gone all the way up the mountain. We've got shine, we've got all the tools ready to realize emptiness, and we've never used it to realize emptiness, and we fall down the mountain again. So what we've never done is realize emptiness before. Once you've cut the root, then you're beginning your climb out of your samsara into your nirvana. You've got more work to do, but you can never fall back after that. You can never fall back after that. And your whole way of seeing the world changes. You have cut all fear. And this is an interesting point from the very beginning. When we start to understand the Buddha's view of the mind, they talk about the fears of samsara. It sounds so peculiar because we don't think of samsara, you know. It's just Buddha's use of the term samsara to refer to being caught up in all the delusions. The normal daily life of nightmares and miseries and anxieties and panic attacks and anger and jealousy and despair and killing people and killing ourselves. That's samsara. So once you've cut the root, called ignorance, you've cut all the dramas. You've cut, I mean, it's not just going to happen overnight. It's a gradual process. So even as you start working on your mind abiding by the laws of karma, you're lessening your fears because you're owning responsibility. And then you start to work on your mind and you lessen attachment and lessen anger and lessen jealousy. You're going to lessen your fears because the nature of all delusions is fear. We don't think, I mean, we think of a person having a panic attack, we think that's fear. But you look at a person raging, angry, screaming, shouting. You don't say, oh, they're having fear. What the hell else do you think they're doing? They're having a complete, serious mental breakdown. That's called anger. All delusions are rooted in fear. That's why we have panic attacks every day, anxious about this happening, worried about we're too fat, too thin, hubby will die, leave me, I don't have enough money, never stopping. It's all rooted in fear. All the delusions are rooted in fear. This is the daily misery of ordinary life because we don't know any option. We occasionally have less fear. We don't begin to notice the fear of attachment. Attachment just looks to us like divine. So the more we see our minds, the more we realize, and this is the Buddha's point, this is so subtle for us. We understand suffering only at the first level when bad things happen. But we do not begin to understand the subtlety of the suffering of having attachment and when the good things happen. So the level of suffering the Buddha is describing is incredibly more subtle, more nuanced than we even imagine, you know. So being free of these delusions is incomprehensible. It's not even a goal in modern psychology. You're just considered mental illness. But this is exactly what Buddha is saying. We'll be literally liberated from the fears of samsara. The mind is joyful, blissful, radiant. You cannot attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, because they are contingent upon the belief in the existence of the intrinsic I. So this is the kind of experiential reality of it, not just some abstract concept. It's real daily life. That's why we've got to start with abiding by the laws of karma, loosen the grip of ego grasping there, begin to take responsibility, become more courageous, then look at our mind and unpack and unravel attachment and aversion and see the nightmare of them, and then lessen the delusions, become more strong, more brave, more courageous, less fearful. Then add bodhicitta. Now this outrageous aspiration to never give up working for sentient beings, and then you realize emptiness. Wow. Amazing. Why it's hard for us to hear these teachings is because the belief in the intrinsic I is so absolute for us that we can't even hear it. In other words, and this is the thing, this is the tragedy of the way samsara works, because we've practiced believing in these deluded stories for so long. As Lama Zopa says, it's bad enough we believe, it's bad enough we see things wrongly. It's bad enough that we see that something has an intrinsic, or, you know, that we believe that we see things wrongly, but the killer is we believe it's true. But more than that, because we've been believing for so long in all these stories that our mind has made up, not only do, you know, that things actually appear that way to us. So it's a bit like you believe for so long that you've got this $5 notes, but you believe they're 50. You've believed for so long that 5 is 50. You don't even see that you're making a mistake. So you're totally addicted to believing this $5 is 50. Every time you go out to spend it, what's going to happen? Because you're believing in a lie, you're going to be disappointed every single time. You'll be devastated. You only get $5 worth. So, I mean, that seems a curious example, but it's a really good one. That's why every time you eat that cake, you're disappointed. We're just completely just totally programmed with the belief of attachment. This is the branch lie that makes the cake look more delicious than it is. Causes us to believe that when I get it, I'll get happy feelings. You know, and so we go out and spend our $5 and get disappointed every single time. And then we forget the next day that the very cake that made you vomit, which is the cake that you think will bring you happiness, you forget that part and you try again. You try, maybe I'll get $50 worth again today, and we just keep trying. We're like completely demented, Buddha says, living in la la land. As Rinpoche says, you know, at least don't believe what you're seeing when you see the delicious cake. At least when you're having that panic attack and you're thinking going to die, everybody's going to die, you'll have nothing, whatever your panic attack's about. At least you hear the rampant story and the little tiny part of your wisdom is going, Rabina, it's not true. It doesn't mean it's not true. Now, this is an interesting point. It doesn't mean it's not true that the cake isn't delicious, because the cake is delicious. But what isn't true is all these extra things you put on top. So, you know, we have all these, for example, because we cling to everything as being permanent. It's one of our major delusions. Because we have so much attachment to have only the lovely things, because therefore we can't stand the thought of the lovely thing disappearing. So it's not as if it's not true that you could die. You could die. That's true. The cake will end up, you know, whatever. That's true. Impermanence is true. You could die tomorrow, but we add the extra fear on top of that because we think that things are permanent. So the horror of your possibility of dying is what's so shocking. So where's the lie there? Impermanence is a truth. You will die. Your husband will die. This woman on one course, she said she thinks all the time about how her husband could die. So that's not a lie. That's not a lie. Things are impermanent. But why the fear that he will die? Because we're not familiar with the truth that he will die. Things do change. Everything is uncertain. This is too scary for us. But we are frantic to make everything set in stone, to make it certain. We manipulate to make things certain. You can't possibly, the more you try to make something certain that isn't certain, the more insane you'll get, the more demented you'll be. So it's not as if, you know, so when we have anxiety, like panic attacks or whatever it might be, let's say angry with my boyfriend, It's not, it is true he was mean to you. No one's arguing with that. He was mean to you. But so where's the lie? The lie is the over-exaggeration of that bad action and the belief that that bad action is the cause of your pain. That's the lie. So this is what's hard to see, you know. It's hard to, we've got to look into these states of mind very precisely and see what the lie is and distinguish between truth and fiction, facts and fiction, you know. The boyfriend was mean to you. The cake is delicious. You can't say it wasn't. But it's all the expectations that added on top and the fears and the dramas added on top. They are the source of the pain. So when we're in touch with reality, the way Buddha's talking, then you know you're going to die. You know you could die today, but it's not fearful. Therefore, you make the most of it. You live within the reality of impermanence. It's struggling against impermanence that makes us so terrified. It's struggling against the, you know, attachment not getting what it wants that makes us so freaked out. So getting in touch with reality means things are impermanent. You could die at any moment, you know. The husband could leave you. The money could end. But, you know, when we have panic about it, all we do is imagine it happening, and then we go completely crazy. And then we try to make it set in stone that it won't happen. Well, you can't make it not happen. So working with it, running with it, going, you know, working with this truth, that's where the fearlessness comes. So I said to this woman, she said, how can I live in the moment? I said, don't worry about living in the moment. Just recognize he will die. You're right, he will die. Why be afraid of it? He will die. But then what's the conclusion? Not just panic and hold on to him and frantic and don't die, which is what we try to do. Just learn to make the most of it, given that you've got him still, and then make the most of it. Practice virtue, being compassionate, be kind, be loving, make the most of the relationship. And then when we wake up next morning and he's still there, it's a bonus. It sounds kind of scary to us because attachment wants to set everything in stone. Attachment wants to organize everything. Attachment's a control freak, a complete control freak. You can't control. It's not possible. It's like trying to contain water. It's like trying to make it stop flowing. You can't. So this is why we go crazy, because we're not in touch with how things are. So impermanence is a good stepping stone to emptiness, you know. And this is where all, you don't just sort of leap into understanding emptiness without anything else. You abide by the laws of karma, that loosens the grip of ego grasping. You're more ready to get emptiness. Then you look at your mind and see the delusions and see how they're all liars. That prepares you for emptiness. You practice bodhicitta, that hugely prepares you for emptiness. It smashes this sense of self-cherishing and self-pity and me all day. You only think of others. So we're so ready then to more easily then get concentration and then realize emptiness. You prime your mind all the way, you know, one step at a time. That's why the path is so important to understand it as coherent. Everything is leading you to realize emptiness, to see the ultimate truth. Then you're free. No more work to do. But now you can't go back after that, you know. So we start with intellect. We've got an intellect, so we start with that to get our head around the use of these words, you know. We tend to mystify the concept of emptiness. Oh, I've been thinking about emptiness for 40 years and I still can't understand it. Oh, that's interesting, Rabina. Tell me the definition. Oh, I don't know. That's like saying you've been thinking about 1 + 1 is 2 for 40 years and you don't know the answer. Well, tell me what 1 + 2 means. Oh, I don't know. Well, how the hell can you think about it if you can't even give the definition? Got to know the meaning of the words. Words are what we use to understand things. So learn the definition. What does the word emptiness mean? What does dependent arising mean? What does this mean? Cause, that, effect, these words. That's language. You have to learn the language, then you can string them together in coherent sentences. That's the stepping stone. That's intellectual. Do not underestimate intellectual certainty. Do not underestimate intellectual clarity. That's like any body of knowledge. You've got to start first intellectually understanding. You got to know what sugar means and what a gram is and what a teaspoon is. You got to know the function of flour, the function of the milk, the function of this, the function of the heat. When you got it all conceptually together, then you make the cake and then you get the taste. Any questions, people? Come on, I haven't had one question today. You made me talk the whole time. Come on.
Venerable.
Good, darling.
There is a question in the chat.
I'm very
I'll just
happy.
find it again here. From our beautiful green Tara. And the question is, okay, can mind be described as a phenomenon? If not, what is it described as, please?
A mind is a phenomenon. It's an existent. The mind is an existent. It's not an object of the senses. It is not physical, but it is an existent. It is a phenomenon. It is an object. It is an object of knowledge. It is an established base. Those five terms are used. So yes, of course it's a phenomenon, and therefore mind can be cognized. It's a more subtle phenomenon. It's not easy to, we can learn about the mind, which is exactly what we're doing here. But as His Holiness says, we can learn all the complicated details about what the mind is, and we need to study it. But eventually to have a direct cognition of your own mind, that's a really sophisticated experience, only the greatest yogis, but we can start, we have to go somewhere. That's why when we start to learn Mahamudra meditation, we use the mind itself, the very thoughts themselves all flying through our head as the object of concentration. It's a really delicious practice. So yes, absolutely, it is a phenomenon. Yes, it exists. Yes, it can be, therefore can be cognized by mind, because mind is not just some absolute concrete thing. Mind is a label given to all its parts. So mind is a label given to deluded states of mind, virtuous states of mind, all the thousands of parts of the mind, all the different mental factors. Mind is a name given to all those components. And so one part of our mind, okay, let's go more deep at this. Let's look at this more. Sometimes, okay, so mind is the name we give to its parts, okay? And the parts of mind are the states of mind, the anger, the love, the jealousy, the compassion, the kindness, the intelligence. There's many bits and pieces of the mind, the sensory consciousness. So when we say, for example, do a meditation called Mahamudra, where the starting point is to concentrate on the mind, we get a bit all cosmic. Oh, I've got to watch my mind with my mind. We get all a bit kind of caught up, It's not complicated. There are many parts of the mind. And when we understand the neutral parts of the mind, or the ones I like to call the mechanics, concentration, intention, attention, discrimination, there are many bits and pieces that we train in single pointed concentration. So when you start to observe, let's say, the object, the phenomenon called the breath, or when you just start to observe the phenomenon called the mind, what that means is I'm going to watch my thoughts, because thoughts are a component of the mind. I'm going to watch the breath. So you locate the sensation at your nose, and then you pay attention to that sensation. The reason you do that is to learn to focus just on that, so you don't keep following all your thoughts, flitting from pillar to post. The other one, the Mahamudra one, which is more difficult, but it's the same principle. You decide you're going to pay attention to your mind. Okay, you have to ask the question, which part of your mind? Well, whatever thoughts pop up. Your thoughts are your mind. Mind is a name you give to all the bits and pieces. Thoughts are the components of your mind. So the Mahamudra meditation, you decide you're going to use attention. You're going to have intention. I will watch my mind. Then you pay attention, and then you try to cultivate the part called mindfulness, which is the ability to not forget what you're doing. You're going to cultivate the part called concentration, which stays on there. You're going to cultivate the part called discrimination. These many bits all do their job. So it's the attention. You pay attention to whatever thoughts pop up. And the job at either watching the breath or watching the thoughts is you don't label them. You let them come and you let the thoughts go. Whether you're watching the breath and the thoughts are coming, you let them come and go. Whether you're watching the thoughts themselves, you let them come and go, So yeah, any more questions there, Anna?
No, but I think we have a question from Som.
Good, Som. Please talk to me. Hello, Som.
Thank you. Hello, Venerable. Thanks for the teaching. I understand how emptiness of self is.
Som, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you not hear me?
I can hear you just starting now.
Sorry. I understand that emptiness of the self is not nihilism. What about emptiness of meaning, like constructed meaning, that someone, let's say Joe Biden realizes emptiness and says that, oh, everything I've worked my life towards is this one thing of being president of something that is dependently arisen. How does Joe Biden continue being president if he realizes that there's no inherent meaning in that position?
Okay, there's an assumption, I think, in your question. There's an assumption that when you realize the absence of inherent existence of being a president, or the absence of inherent existence of whatever it is, there's an assumption there that there's no meaning. So you just chuck the baby out with the bathwater. The fact of the matter is, when you realize the emptiness of being the president, you realize the dependent arising of being the president, therefore president exists. So emptiness actually reinforces the existence of something. It doesn't annihilate the existence of something, which is the instinct we have of emptiness. So the meaning is there, but the point about the meaning is it's merely labeled. We give everything meaning. We are the ones who give meaning. This is what merely labeled means. This is the final dependent arising, that everything comes from our mind. We give everything meaning, but the crucial point about that is it does function exactly as that. So, I agree. I see a long, a piece of metal with a long edge and a sharp edge, and I say to Mummy, what's that? She'll say, that's a knife. And I'll say, what does it do? And she'll give me the definition. It cuts things. Now, the fact is, there is a basis there called a piece of metal. That's the basis of the label knife. So then I decide, okay, that's interesting. I buy into its being a knife. I buy into that function, that meaning. And then to prove it, I must use it and cut something. Then I've proved that it is that. But this is the point. We forget that we labeled it that. We forget we gave it the meaning that. We think the meaning is in the knife itself. That's how we make everything intrinsic. So it's merely labeled knife, but it functions exactly as we decided. So something's existing with no intrinsic nature must also function. This is the two truths put together. You understand?
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And of course, when you've got bodhicitta, if Mr. Biden has got bodhicitta, then what energizes him to want to be the president, which is merely labeled, is to be of benefit to sentient beings. But they too are merely labeled sentient beings, and compassion is merely labeled. Everything is merely labeled. So the instinct we have is all the time of emptiness annihilates the meaning. No, it doesn't. It reinforces things. In fact, things exist because they are empty. Things that aren't empty cannot exist. This is the point that Buddha's making. The things that aren't dependent arising can't exist. And that's why he argues with the Hindu views. I mean, these amazing Hindu yogis annihilated so much of the delusions, but they still held on to this idea of something intrinsic. And the Buddha's whole point is all his arguments with how that is not a possibility. There cannot be something that's intrinsic. It means it has no parts. It means it doesn't depend upon the mind. Therefore, it cannot possibly exist. I'm going to run out of power. Hang on. So that's the thing to try and get used to. Emptiness reinforces existence. Things exist because they are empty, not in spite of. That's why the two truths together is so powerful. You understand?
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Venerable. Appreciate it.
Good point. Yeah. What else, darling people? Anything else there, Anna? Okay. So this point again, this one that Som is making, so this is a very strong instinct within us. That's why, Tsongkhapa's point of realizing emptiness in the framework of dependent arising is a way to guarantee we don't lose the plot, that we don't fall into the abyss of the great mistake. Kind of seeing emptiness in terms of dependent arising grounds us, and we can never get the wrong view. We can never fall into the abyss of the great mistake, as Tsongkhapa puts it. So the other one, again, like we were talking before about emptiness being a phenomenon, emptiness being a thing that exists that the mind can cognize. It's a more abstract phenomenon, obviously. You can't taste it or touch it or smell it, but it's a very real one. The absence of something. It's an easy way to, we get that. The absence of something. In fact, so anyway, this absence of something or emptiness, we tend to see the emptiness and dependent arising as separate, but they're utterly inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other. And that's why Lord Buddha in his Heart Sutra, he tells us that, what he does was, there he is sitting in the mountain, sitting up there at Vulture Peak, and he's in meditation. This is one of the ways he gave some of his teachings. He's in meditation, blissing out. And then two people, his two disciples, Shariputra and Avalokitesvara, as a 10th level bodhisattva, they're having a discussion. And they're actually Buddha's channeling his thoughts into them, and they're discussing the topic, but actually it's a teaching from the Buddha. So then Shariputra asks Avalokitesvara, how do you, understand about all this stuff? And he says, and then the rest of the Heart Sutras are Shariputra, Avalokitesvara giving the answer. And basically what he does is he goes through the different categories of phenomena according to the Buddhist worldview and points out how we have to look at each single one of these as empty of inherent existence. And so he talks about the 5 aggregates, which is the 5 components of a person. Then he talks about the 12 links, the four noble truths. Each of these is empty. There is no this, no this, no that, no this. But the first thing he says was, and he uses the first of the 5 aggregates, and the first of the 5 aggregates is form, and that refers to the physical. So he says form is empty. Then he says emptiness is form. And then he says, emptiness is nothing other than form, and form is nothing other than emptiness. And so what he's meaning is this: where you find the conventional reality called form, where you point to the conventional phenomenon called form, right there on that form, right there with that form, you are going to find at the same time the presence of the emptiness of intrinsic form. Then he says, wherever you find the emptiness of intrinsic form, right there you will find with it inextricably the existence of form. So emptiness, this is the Som's point, you can't possibly separate the emptiness of intrinsic existence of Som from the conventional Som, because the emptiness of intrinsic existence of Som is a characteristic of the Som that does exist. So there's the Som that does exist, the conventionality called Som, and right there on that is the existence at the same time, inextricably, the presence of the other phenomenon called the absence of intrinsic Som. So speaking more simply, so I'm going to say thermos is black. Wherever there's black, in this case, there is thermos. Black is thermos and thermos is black, and black is nothing other than thermos and thermos is nothing other than black. That's exactly what Buddha's saying. So in this particular case, a characteristic of this conventional phenomenon is of this thermos, one of its characteristics is its black color, isn't it? Now, how can you possibly separate the black color from the thermos? I mean, in a simple sense, you can't. So wherever you find black, you will find thermos. And wherever you find thermos, you're going to find black. Or even another phenomenon called impermanence. It's exactly the same concept. This thermos has a quality called impermanence. Where you're going to find thermos, you will find at the same place, at the same time, integrated with it, a characteristic called the presence of impermanence. So the presence of it, where there is the presence of impermanent thermos, you're going to find the presence of thermos. Wherever you find the thermos, you'll find the impermanence of thermos. Wherever you find the impermanence of thermos, you're going to find thermos. You can't separate them. So wherever you find I, you're going to find right there on the mere I, as Lama Tsongkhapa calls it, the presence of the emptiness of intrinsic I. So all this is saying is you can't have emptiness as one thing over there flying off the handle and have a thing over here flying off the handle. That's the two extreme views that we have right now. The two views of we grasp that something has an inherent existence, and then we hear it's empty and we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're kind of demented with these two extreme views. We've got to bring them together. And it finally leads to the actual middle way. The actual middle way, which is only what Buddha's got, is the cognition simultaneously of the two truths, simultaneous cognition of dependent arising and emptiness. So we've got to start moving in the direction towards the middle way, get away from the two extreme views. And even I'm just talking sort of casually here. When we have intense grasping, intense ego grasping, intense attachment, intense anger, intense dramas, we know we are living in hell. That's where we cling to the belief in some inherent me, and that brings all these dramas. And then let's say when attachment starts to get what it wants and you get all happy and excited, that's the believing in things as having an intrinsic nature. And then when the bubble bursts and you're devastated, you go crashing down to the despair of what appears like nihilism, which is the wrong view. These are both extreme views. The over-exaggeration of the status of something, and when attachment gets it, you think you're in heaven, and then the bubble bursts, and then you go crashing down to despair. We go between these two 1,000 times a day. These are like the emotional experience of believing in these two extreme wrong views of nothingness and somethingness. So somethingness gives rise to this grasping at things as permanent and divine and attachment. And then the nothingness is like, I might as well kill myself. Look at the world, you know. Nothing, there's no benefit, there's no point, there's no worthwhile. So we're up and down like yo-yos. It's like we're all bipolar. It's a question of just, I'm not being sarcastic here. The mind is up and down, utterly uncontrolled. This is exactly what Buddha's saying. Between these two extremes of grasping at something, and then when the bubble bursts, there's nothing. You despair, you know. This is the tragedy of samsara, you know. Because we're living in la la land. So what Buddha's telling us is, I've got some methods, baby, to help you get happy. That's all he's saying, you know. So we got to find that out ourselves from working on them. And you start with karma, then you go to the mind, then you go to bodhicitta, then you get to emptiness. It's all graded beautifully, priming your mind perfectly to get there, you know. So the two truths, dependent arising in emptiness. And the word emptiness, we looked at that, just the way we use the word is important to understand. It's a real phenomenon that does exist. The emptiness of tea, the emptiness of $5,000, of course here the emptiness of an intrinsic I, which we've all believed in since the beginning of this time. We want to discover how it has never, doesn't, and could never exist. That's what arises in the yogi's mind, you know. And then you've cut the root of suffering. You've cut the root. Can't go back after that. You can't fall back. You can only move forward. This is also where the two wings of the bird, you know, wisdom wing. If you finish the wisdom wing at the beginning, okay, emptiness, the six perfections, the fifth one and the sixth one. The fifth one is called concentration meditation. That is not even a Buddhist teaching. It's a Hindu teaching. Buddha got it from the Hindus, these genius Indians before him. He happily took it, you know, they happily shared it. So technically, in the teachings in the Lam Rim, technically it's the wisdom wing component, which means it's the Theravada path. It's a Hinayana part. So you first control your body and speech, then you get some renunciation, then you get some concentration, and then emptiness. You now realize emptiness. That also too is a Hinayana teaching. Emptiness is not a Mahayana teaching in its character. It's a Hinayana teaching in its character, but it's put in the Mahayana, in this Lam Rim, at the end of the Mahayana path. And I've heard, you know, and this makes sense. If you just do the wisdom wing and all you got is this renunciation of suffering, and you want to get the hell out of samsara, then when you realize emptiness, you're so blissful, you're so joyful, so blissful, so radiant, so clear that you can forget all about sentient beings. So we don't realize emptiness. You can if you want to, but it's not taught at the wisdom wing. It's not taught in the middle scope. It's a middle scope teaching. It's taught at the end of the Mahayana. Once you've got bodhicitta, then there's no way you're going to lose the plot, because you're driven by unbelievable compassion for sentient beings. Nothing. You're happy to get this bliss, but it does not deter you. It does not throw you, because your compassion overrides your bliss. You are certain to only want to benefit others now. So it's very wise, you know, the way it's presented at the end of the path. It's dangerous otherwise. The bliss is so stupendous, is so tremendous. And these words are real. I mean, Lama Yeshe talks about this, just the bliss of realizing concentration. We've had that in many lifetimes. The bliss is inconceivable. Lama talks about it. And this is real experience, real mental experiences, unbelievable joy, radiant bliss, like your mind is as big as the universe. That's just getting shamatha. And we've had that in many lifetimes. Then to realize emptiness with that, then forget it, you know, you'll forget all about bodhicitta. And that's the difference between the Hinayana path and the Mahayana. That's where in the Mahayana path, the key component of compassion, it's called great compassion, Mahakaruna. And that's the unique characteristic of the compassion of the Bodhisattva. You listen to this. So if you're on the Hinayana path, the Theravadan path, whatever, it's all Buddha's teachings, and not criticizing. And your goal from your past lineage, your goal is to get out of samsara, which is to graduate at middle scope, to graduate at high school, to complete the wisdom wing. So then life after life after life, your goal is to get the hell out of samsara. That's renunciation. We've got to have that. But that's usually, in the Hinayana view, that's usually the only goal you can accomplish, you know, for most people, to get liberation from samsara. So your goal is liberation from samsara. So then as you're progressing life after life, and eventually in some life or other, you're driven by that goal, and you eventually you achieve your own nirvana. You've cut the root. You've finally finished. You've achieved liberation. So now, what do you think about this? What kind of person would you be? You'd be unbelievable. You'd have delusions are gone. You would only have joy, unbelievable bliss, unbelievable love, unbelievable compassion, unbelievable kindness. You couldn't not have those because they are the conventional nature of our mind. You can't lose those. So if you've cut the delusions and, you know, you'd be a joyful, radiant, blissful person. Of course, you're going to have love and compassion, bucket loads of it. But what happens? Your goal all these lifetimes has been get out of samsara. So at the time you die in that life that you've achieved nirvana, your bliss and your goal of getting out of samsara override your compassion, and you don't come back. Now, if you're on the Mahayana path and you got this great compassion, so compassion is, oh my God, look at that suffering. But great compassion is, what can I do to make it go away? It's this personal responsibility. The Bodhisattva have this outrageous, like they're the mother and every being in the universe is their child. They know it's their job. So this great compassion is this stupendous extra level. So you're on the Mahayana path, your goal is Buddhahood. That's your goal. And you go through the stages, and you even go through the same stages as the Hinayana practitioner. You could even at some point achieve your nirvana. But what happens for you when you die, your bliss is overridden by your compassion, and you keep coming back. But you've got to have that compassion. Without the compassion, there's no reason to come back. You're going to lose the plot and zap into bliss. And they say the Hinayana, those who've achieved their nirvana, they're sitting in this subtle state of bliss. And Buddha comes along one day eventually and says, okay, honey, time to get out of this bliss and come back onto the Mahayana path and become a Buddha. I heard one Lama say that giving up that bliss is the worst suffering in the universe. So it's dangerous. That's why they talk in the teachings to go from, you don't want the suffering of either nirvana or samsara. That's the Bodhisattva one. That's why the Bodhisattva one is so powerful, to have this amazing, outrageous compassion. The bliss, you're not disturbed by the bliss. Your compassion overrides your bliss. This is so important. I mean, nothing wrong with the bliss. Go for it. But you got to have compassion in there, because the compassion becomes the overriding reason you even want to become a Buddha. You've got renunciation, but the overriding reason to become a Buddha, the overriding reason is to practice Tantra, is compassion. This is something fundamental to understand, So of course the two wings can help each other. There are very specific techniques to get emptiness, and there are very specific techniques to get bodhicitta. So every time, and we can see this in our daily lives, every time you reach out to another, you practice love, that loosens the grip of the I, doesn't it? Every time you work directly on emptiness, that increases your capacity to connect to others. So they each help each other every time, That's why if we've got a lot of mental suffering, a lot of, overwhelmed by our own misery, our own self, obsessed with ourself all day. I'm not being critical, but this is what suffering is. When you can't think of anyone else because you can't see past your own nose, because you're overwhelmed by your own panic and fears and drama and suffering. In other words, we're totally self-centered. Don't feel guilty about it. It's just the way suffering is. So that's why an antidote to that is just do one kind thing for someone else. It's like a miracle. It puts an atomic bomb under self-centeredness. But it's very hard when you're suffering so terribly, But a person who's got lots of compassion but does not have enough wisdom, that's also dangerous. You can get trampled on. You can get misused. So you've got to have wisdom. And that's why His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. And Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. And that's our biggest problem in our culture. Some people have bucket loads of big heart, good compassion, but zero wisdom. So they make a mess of themselves and of others. So compassion and wisdom have to come together. And wisdom is what you get as you gradually work on your mind, lessening delusions, lessening self-centeredness, lessening attachment and anger and fears and dramas. Then your mind can be more spacious and you can see other people out there, you know. And then as a bodhisattva, you get more courage. You have this enthusiasm. You'll never give up, you know. Got to have two wings of the bird. Okay, you darling people. What about it? Any other questions here? Yes.
Yeah. So it would seem as though, it seems as though to me that perfecting bodhicitta, a prerequisite to that is a pretty strong realization of anatta. And it seems as though there's I hate to even say that, like a fine line at, you know, having a realization of emptiness, like a strong realization of emptiness prior to having a strong establishment of a bodhicitta mind. So
that can be that's the danger. Yes, it can be the danger.
I guess my question is, I guess I'm not afraid of like stumbling into emptiness.
Hey, good. No, don't be afraid. Be delighted. Go on. That's right.
So that's, I guess that you know, reading Asanga's work now to the, you know, path of unsurpassed, you know, complete enlightenment, and that's a warning, you know, that's referenced in the Lam Rim, and that's a warning. It's a warning of, you know, don't get rid of the afflictions too bad, because suddenly you've gone too far and you can't get back. So I don't know. I guess the question is where in there.
Keep remembering that the whole point of it is bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the one that gets you to be enlightened. Wisdom just gets you out of samsara. So if we forget the bodhicitta, that's when if we don't forget the bodhicitta, then there's no danger.
So if the motivation, you know, if you're constantly setting the motivation and coming
right. It has to be that. That's exactly right.
Okay, coming
the motivation for realizing emptiness, the motivation for giving up anything, it has to be bodhicitta. That's where it can be then to be no danger, because we will not forget bodhicitta.
So again, that's constantly setting that motivation, yes, that's right. And having the reason for doing this is for the bodhicitta.
Yes, Matthew, that's the point. And the other one is interesting. That's why you've got to have wisdom. We can even lose bodhicitta. So as long as we remember emptiness all the time too, and remember bodhicitta, they've got to go hand in hand. Then you're in no danger either way, because you're going to even lose bodhicitta, but you can't lose emptiness. Okay,
great. I'm going to go out and realize emptiness this afternoon then.
Good on you. Well done, Matthew. I rejoice. That's it. Then you can, that's wonderful. And that's why, with the teachings of the bodhicitta one, this is constant remembering of the bodhisattva motivation. And that's something that's not our topic this weekend, but I'm going to have to talk about it, I think, as something we hear this, do everything with bodhicitta, we hear Lama Zopa say. We go, huh? Do everything with bodhicitta. What do you mean? We don't hear it. So it's like we're sort of thinking that he's saying, I've got to have bodhicitta at that moment, which is clearly absurd. Of course, you can't have it, but you've got to start with the thought. The thought is the point. The thought. And this is when we start to understand karma. This is a really crucial point. When we understand karma right back at the beginning in junior school, the first scope, and we start to unpack what an action is and how we create it, and what it is that determines, this is the key point, what it is that determines that whatever we do or say or think is a positive or negative action is the motivation. This is why in the example, you could have, Matthew has a rat in his kitchen and I have a rat in my kitchen. And let's say, a complete action would be, 1, as an object called a rat. 2, our mind involved in the doing of the action of killing the rat. And there are 2 parts there. There's actually more, but we'll keep it simple. There's the intention, bare bones volition. I will kill the rat. That we both got that so far. We both got a rat. The first of the 4 components of a complete action. You have the rat. The object is there in each of our cases. The second part, our mind is involved in it. That's the second part. So 2A is intention, bare bones. I will kill the rat. Matthew has it. Rabina has it. We both have that thought. Now the difference comes, and that's 2B, and that's the motivation. So in his case, let's say the rat is suffering, and he has the view, like the world does, that if I kill the rat, I'll stop its suffering. So he might have tremendous compassion for the rat. He really believes that if he kills the rat, he's going to stop the suffering. We get that. We do it every day with our damn pets. So there's real compassion in his heart, compassion for this level of suffering. 3, but what's my motivation? This is the difference now. My motivation is disgust and aversion. So that's what that's where the one difference is, the one piece that's different in this entire scenario of each of us killing a rat. 1, there's a rat, same for both. 2, the mind is involved. 2A, intention. I will kill the rat. He's got that too. Now the difference. His motivation is compassion. My motivation is disgust and aversion. 3, we each do the action. We kill the rat. 4, result, dead rat. The one piece in there that makes a complete difference in the action, in the character, in the karmic result. And that's because of the motivation. Now, this is not saying, so that means Matthew, he did kill a rat. I killed a rat. He had intention. I had intention. He did the action. The rat is dead. Same. The difference is his motivation. He meant well. Now, of course, as Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough, because he doesn't realize he probably sent the poor rat to the bloody lower realms. Another worse, even worse than a rat rebirth. He put it from the frying pan into the fire. That even could be true, but from his side, he meant well. So that's why meaning well is not enough. You've got to have wisdom, but nevertheless, his motivation mitigates the action. Now, this is not saying we've got to run around killing everybody because we mean well. No, just don't kill, please. But this is the point about motivation. It's exactly the same as a positive action. Let's say, Matthew is rich and I want his money. So I'm all lovey-dovey to Matthew. He thinks I like him. I don't. I just want his money. So I'm all kind and generous to Matthew, and he needs $20 for a taxi. He can't find his wallet. Oh, I'll give you $20, Matthew. Don't worry. And he thinks, oh, isn't Rabina kind? No, she's not. Her motivation stinks. So it is a valid action. Generosity is called a virtuous action. Killing is called a non-virtuous action. You can't argue with that. But look at my motivation. The object is there, called Matthew. Number 2, intention, I will give Matthew $20. 2B, motivation, completely manipulating, completely to make him like me so he'll give me his money. 3, I do the action. 4, he gets the $20. He's got his $20. My motivation stinks. So it's technically a virtuous action, like killing is technically a negative one in theory, but the motivation determines what karmic seeds you plant. That's the thing. Motivation is the key. So we don't, in the beginning stages, there's no pussyfooting. You just don't kill. You don't steal. You don't lie. You don't do anything. There's no playing around. But this is when we get to more advanced levels and we get to the Bodhisattva path and you've got discipline. You do not kill, lie, steal. You've got incredible ethics. But at the Bodhisattva level of the vows, you have a vow at the Bodhisattva level to break an earlier vow because it's to benefit to others. This is where it's powerful. So Bodhisattvas can kill because their motivation is so clear, but they've also got wisdom. So motivation is massive. First one, just have discipline. Don't kill, steal, lie. But then when you get to the Bodhisattva level, the point of the first vows is to protect you from future suffering. The point of the second level of vows is to help others. So they're more spacious, more profound, and their motivation is the mass. That's where Lama Zopa comes in, never stopping, telling us about how to use a positive motivation in all the actions we do. Basically, if you're practicing just the Hinayana level, which is junior school, which is the first scope, there's no space for sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Given that you're still in samsara, you have as little sex as possible. You have as little food as possible. You discipline your body. You discipline your speech. You don't go around having money. That's the really fundamental way to live a good life of ethics. Now, if you're on the bodhisattva path, because of this whole vast difference in view, your bodhisattva vows are mainly to help you help others. The assumption is more discipline. The assumption is some wisdom. So now you even have a vow where you would break an earlier vow because it's genuinely for the sake of another. So forget even that, the bodhisattva one is this, that, there's no wriggle room in the first level to eat lots of cake, or to eat cake, or even have lots of sex and drugs and rock and roll. You just got to have discipline. But the bodhisattva level, if you're given that we haven't renounced sex, drugs, and rock and roll, given that we're still craving our cake and our boyfriends and our handbags, then what the bodhisattvas are doing is giving us, what the teachings are giving us is this thing to mitigate it. Well, given that you're going to have sex and drugs and rock and roll, Rinpoche is saying to us, stick bodhicitta in there, please. That will calm it down. That will create virtue. That's why before you shove the food in your mouth, you think of it as empty. You think you're going to eat to benefit sentient beings. That puts a tremendous amount of virtue in your mind. It's a saving grace. It's a practical issue. That's why to think of it, just to think of emptiness, the food is no inherent nature, and to think of offering to eat for all sentient beings, you created so much virtue. There's still some attachment there, but the action done purely with attachment and no virtuous motivation, you're just continuing samsara. But this is your saving grace. So that's why when you have sex, offer your gorgeous husband, give him some decent, be gorgeous, be divine, have delicious sex, and do it with bodhicitta. But that we think, oh, that can't be right. That sounds like tricky. Even my friend Lynn in San Francisco, everybody's like this. Oh, how can I say that I can watch Netflix all day with bodhicitta? I said, well, what's your option? You're going to get guilty all day? That just makes it more negative. If you're going to watch Netflix, if you're going to have food and going to have a boyfriend, you might as well stick bodhicitta in there. It calms it down and you create virtue. You're programming your mind to do things with virtue. Honestly, but we think, oh, I can't do that. That sounds wrong. We're so fundamentalist, So the more you realize it's empty, that Netflix, the more you do it with, at least put bodhicitta in there. Okay, I am lazy. I know I'm lazy, Lama Zopa. You talk to the Buddha or whoever yourself, but I'm going to do this with the wish to become a better person so I can benefit others. It's tremendous. It's skillful means. We're talking about the importance of the motivation. This is the point. It's such a practical issue, people. We have to remember it again and again. And it's like a miracle because it loosens the grip of everything. Remembering emptiness and remembering bodhicitta, it puts atomic bombs under samsara. And this is the skill of the bodhisattva path. It's like you have your cake and eat it too. It's so brilliant. We've got to hear it properly, So before you shove the food in the mouth, before you just do any dumb action, you think of emptiness and you think of bodhicitta. Just to remember emptiness, to remember bodhicitta, it's like amazing, This is so much. This is really, it's just like, it's a way to easily live our lives, which are in general samsaric. We all have attachment and aversion, and most of us aren't ready to go to the mountains, But this makes this mitigates things. It puts a whole new dimension on our actions. So when we understand this, it's like crazy not to do it, just to remember bodhicitta, remember emptiness. Pabonka Rinpoche says, even if you're not even sure what emptiness means, just to remember things don't have an intrinsic nature, just to remember things. No, he says, just to remember that things don't exist the way they appear. Just to think that is tremendous, It loosens the grip on everything. It's incredible. So this is the one about how to put emptiness into daily life. Okay, we've got to squeeze our brains by thinking of these things that we talked about. But in general, the whole approach of emptiness is dependent arising. That's how you do, that's the proactive way of putting emptiness, dependent arising. Things are interdependent. And so, of course, the subtlest one of interdependence, we haven't even begun to talk about it. The subtlest level of interdependence is merely labeled. And this is the one we really need to apply in daily life, is that, everything We label things a certain way, and then we believe it, and we think it comes from the object itself. But just to remember that we call things what they are. So one of the most marvelous ways, His Holiness one time was asked, how do you apply emptiness in daily life? Well, he gave the answer in terms of dependent arising. He said, see things from a different point of view. That literally is the meaning. Because when we're so fixated, let's say you've got anger in your mind, or you've got attachment so strong, the way the mind is, when we've got delusions are running strong, the mind is fixated. It's narrow, it's limited, it's got a very limited view. It's like tunnel vision. It's a good way to put it. And it's very fundamentalist. Now, you know this is true. If a person like a friend of yours is really upset, freaking out, and you're trying to get them to see things from a different point of view, trying to get them to be more optimistic, or trying to, let's say they have a lot of self-loathing. Of course, when you're stuck in that mind, you totally believe exactly what anger is telling you, that you are a creep. Now, you can look onto that person. You know this person, you love this person. You can see their good qualities. You know you're being realistic. And you try to kind of soften their anger, soften their self-loathing by saying some good things about them. And you know they're there. You've seen the evidence of them, but look at that person. When you're stuck in that view, you can't see anything else. You're frozen in space. No, Rabina, I am a creep. No, Rabina, you are wrong. I am ugly. 27 people can tell that person their good qualities. And when you're overwhelmed by that self-loathing, and this is just one example of a delusion, you only believe what you see. You don't even begin to believe what the other people say. And even though you trust them as your friends, that's how tragic delusions are, you know. So they cause us to be absolutist. Delusions are fundamentalist. When they're very strong, that cake is the cause of my happiness, and no matter what happens, I'm going to get it. Look at what people do when they're fixated on something, fixated with attachment on something or somebody. They will do anything to get that object. So obsessed. That's attachment. Talk about obsessive, compulsive, all these words. It's attachment, ladies. And we believe only that is true. And there's no way in the world you can see something from another point of view. That's why his answer was so profound, but so simple. Try to see it from another point of view. And that means you've got to ask the question, well, you know, this is my view at the moment. I'm completely living in this panic attack. I'm a complete creep. Everything's a disaster. Things have gone wrong. The husband left me. Nothing is good. Everything is hopeless. I might as well kill myself. To have enough courage to even say to yourself, I know this feels overwhelming. It feels the absolute truth to me, but a tiny part of your wisdom saying, Rabina, maybe there's another way of seeing things. I'll give myself a bit of space here. Just to even say that is like putting atomic bombs under the delusions, because delusions in their nature are fundamentalist. Fundamentalist. This is how it is. We know this state of mind. That's when we despair, because you can't see any other way of seeing it. That's why I always use my example of my friend Sunny in prison. She's out of prison now. She was there for 17 years on death row, accused of killing 2 policemen with her husband. She lost her children. Her parents got killed in a car accident. Her husband got executed. His head burst into flames when she was at the execution. She was in prison. They were totally innocent. I mean, that's enough to make people go completely out of their brain with insanity. And many people in prison, wrongly accused, do go mad. She had this astonishing ability to see things from another point of view. She said, I knew I had the choice to change her mind. This is miraculous. This is applying dependent arising. So she was in prison. She was wrongly accused. They're facts. They're not wrong. They're facts. She was on death row. She was innocent. But she knew, said at some point, I knew I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. She's not a Buddhist. We talk about karma now. She has no particular interest in karma. She's got this incredible emotional intelligence from some past life practice, you know. She knew she could see it differently. She knew she could find a way to interpret this nightmare that kept her sane and reasonable. So she said, I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. This is the exact application of emptiness. That's why the whole teaching about transforming problems into happiness, to see a thing called a problem as good, that's labeling it differently. This is what it means when His Holiness says how to apply emptiness in daily life. See it from another point of view. It is miraculous. And look how hard it is, because these delusions are so absolute in our mind. And especially when they're really rampant, it's not possible to see anything different. When you're overwhelmed by jealousy and the husband just left you, that pain is so unbearable, you can't even imagine seeing it differently. So that's why you got to protect yourself and just nourish yourself and just be careful and get over the pain. But slowly the bit of wisdom comes. You start to see things. The light starts to come. When you're overwhelmed by your panic attacks, take care of yourself. It is outrageous, but have some tiny part of your mind thinking, I can learn to see this differently. I can learn to change my mind. That's applying dependent arising, and that's the way to realize emptiness. Nothing has an intrinsic nature. Nothing is set in stone. Nothing exists from its own side. It's all these words, This is every second of the day we can practice this. What else, darling people? How is the time going? 10 minutes to go. Any other questions, sweethearts? 10 minutes. Are we frozen again? Have you been hearing
the chat, Venerable? We can hear you, Venerable, yes.
Oh, good. Nothing in the text, nothing in the chat?
Nothing in the chat.
Anything else then? No other questions? Nothing.
Oh, yes, Ginger. Would you like to?
Good, Ginger. Talk to me, sweetheart.
I missed the part about practicing Tantra. You said it's so important or something, and I missed that. I don't know a whole lot about Tantra.
No. What did I say? Do you remember? What was in the framework of? What were we discussing?
Framework of...
what was I saying?
You were discussing bodhicitta, I believe.
Oh, okay. So now I think what I meant there, Ginger, was that when we start, like talking about a serious yogi, serious yogis will have single point of concentration, get all this bliss. So that's why it's important to add the bodhicitta to that. But equally, especially if you're going to practice Tantra, where the whole goal, the whole practice is to see yourself as sublime, to develop bliss as quickly as possible, to use that bliss to help you realize emptiness. So it's utterly dangerous if you don't have the bodhicitta. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Do you understand, darling? That was really the point. Because the whole emphasis in Tantra is to energize bliss, to energize the senses and to energize bliss, because it's found by the greatest yogis, what Tantra is all about, that bliss, this very subtle level of incredible bliss that we can experience is like a powerful rocket boost to get us to get concentration very quickly, which means we can realize emptiness very quickly. So it can be dangerous if there's attachment. It can be dangerous if there's attachment and there's not enough bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is what drives the greatest tantric yogis. They're so full of this amazing compassion. They are not in danger ever because their compassion is so tremendous. That's my point, Ginger. Does that make sense, sweetheart? Good. Okay, good. What else, people? Nothing else? This is the least questions that have ever been asked in 3 hours. Maybe just everything makes sense. That's good. That's a good sign, isn't it? Well, I don't know what else to say, darlings. I mean, we've got 9 minutes to go. I mean, I'm trying to cheat you of time or anything, but what else is there? What else can I think of? This is important. So you've got to squeeze your brains, okay? Study the words. Try to understand the use of the words. Try to use the logic. Read the marvelous, so many marvelous teachings out there, and the techniques of how to do it. Wonderful teachers by His Holiness, and utilizing these different techniques to help us loosen the grip of ego grasping. 1 point. Second point, get to see how all the Lam Rim is priming our mind. get the view that when you're abiding by the laws of karma, the implicit teaching there is to see dependent arising, because cause and effect, karma's cause and effect. So that loosens the grip of ego grasping. When you get to look at the suffering of all the disturbing emotions in the middle scope, then you look at the implicit teaching and you begin to see how these delusions are misconceptions. Then all this is preparing you then to get to dependent arising and really be able to unpack and unravel the misconception called ego grasping. And then you do all the thinking there. You learn to look at the thinking, all those different logical arguments, trying to, see what, trying to, like using this example of one or many. This seems it's an odd argument, but it's a very powerful argument. We didn't even finish all the teachings. We didn't even begin really. I mean, there was one, we never looked at the whole, one of the mistakes we make is to see there's a separate I. The other mistake we make is to see that there's an I that's completely oneness with all the parts. We didn't even look at that one. But to look at these, to read these, but also apply in daily life this approach of seeing things differently, because this is the teaching about merely label. This is the subtlest one. This is the subtlest meaning of dependent arising. And this is the level that Lama Zopa teaches at ever. On the face of it, it seems simpler. But this is where it's really powerful, where we can learn to see things differently, because it's not set in stone that it exists like that. We can label it differently, like Sunny in prison. She labeled it differently. And it functioned in that way. She's not living in a fantasy world. It functioned exactly that she was in a cave meditating. She decided it was an opportunity instead of the rage and despair of I should not be in this prison. This is what transforming problems means. Transforming problems into happiness is outrageous bodhisattva practice, where you learn to welcome a problem. This is exactly what it means. You label it differently. It's too shocking initially. You've got to be very brave to practice this. But this is daily application of this teaching. It's practicing bodhicitta and it's practicing emptiness, right there. When your husband's mean to you and you're brave enough to see it differently. In your mind, you thank him for being mean because he just showed you your anger. That's the attitude. But you've got to be brave to do that. You've got to be ready to do that. You've got to be a suitable vessel, as Pavanka Rinpoche says. And a suitable vessel is a person who's understood the path, understood karma, understood renunciation. But merely label is very powerful. We label things a certain way and then we believe it. So if we can label something a certain way and believe it, we can label it differently. We can do that. It's up to us to see that. It's very powerful. It puts atomic bombs under ego grasping, makes us courageous. That's exactly what Sunny did in those 17 years in prison. And therefore she continued to work on her freedom. She never lost the plot. She did yoga, she helped other people, she developed more compassion, and she never stopped working on her freedom because it was still wrong that she was in prison. So she got her freedom eventually. She kept her wits about her. So I think that's it, people, darlings. Just apply these different approaches, never give up. Keep reading the teachings, keep trying to understand them, understand technically what emptiness means, what dependent arising means, and try to apply in this down-to-earth way, We can call things differently. We can label them differently. It's hard work, but that's amazing. And remember bodhicitta and emptiness every time you eat, every time you have your sex with your newest boyfriend, excuse me, being blunt, every time you buy a nice new handbag, every time you enjoy anything. This is where and this is another practice. You offer the pleasure. So if you're going to be doing Netflix, instead of feeling guilty, you think, okay, I'm lazy. I'm going to watch my Netflix. I'm going to learn a bit about human nature. I'll get to see it has no intrinsic nature, and I'll try and do it to relax so I can be a happy, wise person. And I can then, learn from it. I can learn from it, This is the point. So we can use everything in our lives. It can all be grist for the mill. To have this schizophrenic view, or there's a samsara over there and I'll do samsara with guilt and then I'll do my holy practice on my cushion. That's ridiculous. Your entire life can be used to the path. That's the whole brilliance with the understanding of emptiness and bodhicitta. That's like a miracle. You can use everything in your life as part of your path, That's the point, darlings. That'll do. Mary, who's host today? Anna, darling, Anna. So I'm going to leave you all now. We'll just do a little motivation. A little prayer. I just think that all these seeds we've planted, all these 3 hours we've been discussing, thinking, analyzing, contemplating, anything that came from this, we're going to use these tools to do all these things, to apply this in our daily life. So we never give up on developing our amazing potential. So we never give up becoming a Buddha. And then may all our holy beings, our lamas, live long, long lives. His Holiness and Lama Zopa, all our teachers live long, long lives. And may we live long lives so we can practice virtue and help others. You know, the world needs virtue. And that's it. Precious ones, that'll do. No need to sing songs. The thoughts are the ones that count. Look at what Shankar's got, a cutter there or something. What have you got there, Shankar?
Of course, Venerable. So
God.
thank you for your teachings. It's
Oh,
wonderful.
it's a total pleasure. Thank you, darlings, all of you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so kind, Ginger. What, darling?
Anna, would you mind putting the mandala, the Thanksgiving mandala on the screen?
That would be Mary, yes.
Okay, or Mary. All right.
Okay, let's offer a mandala. Very nice idea, Shankar, yeah. I'll get a
So-
bit short with all the prayers.
Saji Puki Chuksing Meto Tramri Rablingji Ni Degan Padi Sange Jingdu Mikte Uwa Hiroku Namada Jingla Chuparshu. May my venerable Lama's life be firm. His white divine action spread in the 10 directions. May the torch of the teachings of Lozang always remain, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms.
Wonderful, Shankar. Thank you so much. Thank you, darling people.